History is written by the victors, but the most dangerous warriors are often written out of the books entirely. You've heard of Chris Kyle. You've heard of Carlos Hathcock, but you haven't heard of her. She had no rank on her uniform, no name on her grave. Yet in the freezing mountains of the Hindu Kush, a Navy SEAL commander broke every protocol to give her the ultimate sign of respect. This is the classified story of the Wraith, the woman who saved a team that didn't want her. Wyoming, 1998. The wind in the Copper Mountains didn't howl, it screamed. At 7,000 feet, the air was thin enough to make a grown man dizzy, but 10-year-old Clara Vance wasn't dizzy. She was motionless, lying prone in the snow, her small frame wrapped in a canvas coat, 3 sizes too big. She watched a bull elk through the scope of a beat-up Remington 700. "Breath control, Clara," her father's voice whispered, barely audible over the wind. He was a Vietnam vet, a tunnel rat who had come home with too many ghosts and a bottle of whiskey for a best friend. He wasn't a good father, but he was a terrifyingly good teacher. Between the heartbeats, don't pull, squeeze. Crack, the elk dropped. Clean kill, 300 yards. Clara didn't know it then, but she had just begun the training for a job that didn't officially exist. Virginia Beach, 2011. The room smelled of stale coffee and high-grade anxiety. It was a basement briefing room in a nondescript building that didn't appear on any Google map. In the center of the room sat Admiral Thomas Mac McAllister, a man whose face looked like it had been carved out of granite and left out in a sandstorm. Opposite him sat Clara Vance. She was 30 now. She had spent 6 years in the army, racking up distinct accolades in marksmanship that baffled her superiors. She had outshot every ranger at Fort Benning during an inter-service competition, but because of the combat exclusion policies of the time, she was relegated to a logistics desk. She was a racehorse trapped in a petting zoo. Lieutenant Vance, the Admiral, said, sliding a manila folder across the steel table. Or should I say the record holder for the longest iron sight shot at the Benning Invitational. "Just doing my job, sir." Clara replied, her voice flat. She didn't salute. She was told this meeting was off the books. "We have a problem, Clara. The teams, they're operating in environments where they can't be seen. But sometimes they need an angel on their shoulder. Someone who can move where they can't. Someone who doesn't look like a threat until it's too late." He leaned forward. "We are running a pilot program, Operation Valkyrie. Tier 1 assets. Deep cover. We need shooters who can blend into the local populace if things go south or disappear into the terrain for days without support. We don't need door kickers. We need ghosts." Clara opened the folder. It was empty, except for a single picture of a snow-capped mountain range in Afghanistan and a date. "If I say yes," Clara asked, "then you resign your commission today," McAllister said, lighting a cigar even though the room was a smoke-free zone. "You cease to exist. You will undergo a modified Bud S basic underwater demolition, SEAL selection, privately with a hand-picked cadre. You won't get a trident. You won't get a ceremony. You'll get a rifle a target and a guarantee that if you are captured, the United States Navy has never heard of you." Clara looked at the picture. She looked at the Admiral. For the first time in years, she felt the same electric chill she had felt in the Wyoming snow. "Where do I sign?" The training was not designed to test her. It was designed to break her. For 6 months, Clara and 3 other female candidates were subjected to a hell that made standard Hell Week look like a vacation. They were drowned, frozen, starved, and beaten. The instructor was Master Chief Bulldog Miller, a legend in the community. He was 6'4", built like a tank, and hated the idea of Valkyrie. He believed the trident was sacred, and this secret program was a mockery of it. "You think you belong here?" Miller screamed, spraying sand into Clara's face as she held a heavy log over her head in the surf. "You think because you can shoot a quarter off a fence post you can run with my boys. You are weak. You are a liability." One by one, the other women rang the bell. They quit. The physical toll was too high. The psychological abuse from the cadre, who were instructed to be merciless, was unbearable. By month 4, only Clara remained. She had fractured a rib in the surf passage. She was coughing up blood. But she wouldn't quit. During the stalking phase, she lay in a swamp for 72 hours buried in mud, while Miller and his team walked right over her. They couldn't find her. When she finally revealed her position, she was 10 feet from Miller's boot, her rifle barrel trained on his chest. Miller looked down at the mud-caked creature rising from the earth. There was no smile on his face, but the hatred was gone. It was replaced by a cold, calculating assessment. "Get up, Vance," Miller grunted. "We ship out in 48 hours. The Hindu Kush, Afghanistan. Late 2012. The helicopter ride was deafening. Clara sat in the back of a Chinook, her face covered by a chamois scarf. She wore no patches. Her uniform was sterile, standard issue, multicam with no branch tapes. She carried a MK-13 Mod 5 sniper rifle, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, painted to match the jagged grey rocks of the mountains. She was attached to SEAL Team 4 Alpha Platoon. The platoon commander was Lieutenant Commander Jack Hayes. Hayes was a good officer, smart, tactical, and protective of his men. But he wasn't happy about babysitting a poor spook. "Listen to me," Hayes had told her at the FOB Forward Operating Base. "I don't know who you know in Washington, and I don't care. When we step off this bird, you stay in the rear. You are cultural support. You talk to the women and children. If we take contact, you keep your head down. Do not engage unless I give the order. Do you understand? Loud and clear." "Commander," Clara said. She didn't bother explaining that she was the best shot on the bird. They wouldn't believe her anyway. The mission was a capture-kill on a high-level Taliban commander named Mullah Rahim, known as the Butcher of Pek. Intel placed him in a fortified compound halfway up a valley that the Soviets had failed to take in the 80s, and the Americans had struggled with for a decade. It was a kill box they inserted at 0200 hours under the cover of darkness. The air was freezing. The team moved with the fluid grace of Predator's night vision goggles, turning the world into a grainy green phosphor. Clara moved at the back, her movements silent. She watched the ridgelines. She didn't like the setup. The valley walls were too steep, the choke points too obvious. "Alpha 1, this is Alpha 2, whispered the team's point man. "Movement at the compound. 3 packs armed." "Hold fire," Hayes commanded. "We need positive ID on the Butcher." They set up a perimeter. Clara scanned the cliffs above them. Her gut was twisting. It was too quiet. The local dogs weren't barking. The birds weren't moving. "Commander," Clara whispered into her comms. "We're being watched. 11 o'clock high. The ridge. Maintain radio silence. Asset." Miller, the Master Chief from her training, who was leading the enlisted men, snapped over the net. "That's just goats. Goats don't carry RPGs," Clara muttered to herself. Suddenly the night exploded. It wasn't just an ambush, it was a massacre. From 3 sides of the valley, machine gun fire rained down on the SEALs. It was a well-coordinated L-shaped ambush. An RPG slammed into the rocks near the point man, sending shrapnel tearing through the air. "Contact front! Contact right!" Hayes screamed. "Pull back, get to cover." The team scrambled behind a cluster of boulders, but they were pinned. The enemy had the high ground and heavy weapons. Bullets chewed up the rock, sending stone splinters flying like glass. "Man down, Jackson is hit." The team's primary sniper, Petty Officer Jackson, had taken a round to the shoulder. He was out of the fight. The team was effectively blind to the long-range threats. They were taking fire from a DSHK heavy machine gun positioned about 800 meters up the cliff. It was tearing their cover apart. If they tried to move, the DSHK would cut them in half. If they stayed, the mortars would zero in and finish them. "Miller, can you get a suppressive line on that heavy gun?" Hayes yelled, dragging the wounded Jackson deeper into cover. "Negative, it's too far, and we can't get an angle without exposing ourselves," Miller shouted back, firing his M4 blindly over the rock. "We need air support. Air is 20 minutes out." Hayes checked his mag. They didn't have 20 minutes. They had maybe 2. Clara Vance looked at the heavy gun position through her scope. She was lying in the dirt 10 yards behind the main group, ignored in the chaos. She adjusted the turrets on her scope. Distance 830 meters, angle 25 degrees inclination, wind full value left to right 10 mph. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't wait for orders. She exhaled. Doof. The suppressed report of the Mk-13 was lost in the cacophony of the battle. Up on the cliff, 800 meters away, the gunner on the DSHK snapped backward his head, misting pink. The gun went silent. "Who took that shot?" Miller yelled, looking at Jackson, who was bleeding out. "Jackson." "Wasn't me." Jackson groaned. Before Miller could process it, a second fighter jumped onto the heavy machine gun. Doof! The second gunner collapsed over the weapon. Clara cycled the bolt smoothly. She wasn't panicking. She was working. "Commander!" Clara's voice came over the comms, calm and icy. "Heavy gun is neutralized. You have a window to move the wounded to the secondary extraction point." Hayes looked back. He saw the cultural support woman. She wasn't cowering. She was in a perfect sniper-prone position, the rifle becoming an extension of her body. "Did you take that shot?" Hayes asked, disbelief in his voice. "We can discuss my resume later, sir," Clara said, tracking a new target. "Right now you have 3 hostiles maneuvering on your left flank. RPG team. Doof! The RPG carrier dropped mid-sprint. Move!" Hayes roared, snapping out of his shock. Miller grabbed Jackson. "We're moving to the exfil asset. Can you cover us?" "I'm not going anywhere, Commander," Clara said. "Go!" The team moved. It was a desperate scramble over loose shale and jagged rock. Clara stayed behind, acting as the rear guard. Every time a Taliban fighter popped his head up to fire at the retreating SEALs, Clara put a 300 Win Mag round through it. She was a machine. But the enemy was smart. They realized the fire was coming from a single position. "Mortars," Clara whispered. She heard the thump in the distance. She rolled to her right, just as the ground where she had been lying erupted in fire and dirt. The concussive blast threw her 5 feet. Her ears rang, her vision blurred. She tasted copper. She scrambled back to her rifle. It was covered in dust, but functional. She checked the scope. The team was making progress, but they were being pursued by a truck mounted with a recoilless rifle. "Commander vehicle approaching your 6. We see it." "We're out of anti-tank," Hayes shouted. Clara checked her ammo. She had 5 rounds left. The truck was 200 meters away, moving fast over bumpy terrain. A moving target at that distance was a 1 in a million shot. "Aim for the engine block," she thought. "No, won't stop it fast enough." She aimed for the driver. She tracked the vehicle. She had to lead it by 10 feet. She had to account for the spin drift, the Coriolis effect, the erratic bouncing of the truck. She held her breath. Squeeze. The bullet flew for nearly 2 seconds. The truck swerved violently. The driver slumped over the wheel. The vehicle flipped rolling 3 times before exploding into a fireball. Target down, Clara whispered. But as she tried to stand up to rejoin the team, her leg gave way. She looked down. A piece of shrapnel from the mortar blast had torn through her thigh. Blood was soaking the multicam fabric black. "Commander," Clara said, her voice tight with pain. "I'm hit. Leg is non-functional. I can't make the run." There was a pause on the radio. "We are coming back for you," Hayes said instantly. Miller turned the squad around. "Negative, Commander," Clara said firmly. "You have a critical casualty with Jackson. If you come back, you'll be pinned down in the open. The birds are 5 minutes out. You get your men on that chopper." "I am not leaving you behind," Hayes yelled. "You don't have a choice, Jack." She used his first name. It stopped him cold. "I'll buy you time. Get the bird on the ground. Come back for me when the gunships arrive." She dragged herself behind a rock pile. She had 4 rounds left in her rifle. She pulled her sidearm a Sig Sauer P226. 2 mags. She looked down the valley. Dozens of fighters were swarming up the slope toward her position. They knew she was alone. Clara Vance, the woman with no name, racked the bolt of her rifle. "Come and get it," she whispered. "The Hindu Kush." 02:45 hours. Clara Vance was no longer a woman. She was a physics equation of survival. Pain is information. That's what the instructors had said during the drowning pool exercises. Right now, the information was screaming that her femoral artery was intact, but the quadriceps in her right leg was shredded. She tied a tourniquet high and tight, gritting her teeth so hard she felt a molar crack. The bleeding slowed to a dark ooze. She checked her MK-13. 3 rounds. She checked her SIG P226. 2 magazines, 15 rounds each. She had 1 fragmentation grenade, and she had a combat knife, a serrated piece of carbon steel her father had given her on her 18th birthday. Below her, the shadows detached themselves from the rocks. The Taliban fighters were moving up the scree slope. They were cautious now. The demon on the hill had killed their heavy gunner, their RPG team, and destroyed their vehicle. They thought they were facing a platoon. They didn't know it was 1 bleeding woman. Breath in, breath out. The first silhouette crested the ridgeline 40 yards out. Crack. The Mech-13 barked. The man dropped. 2 rounds left. "Allahu Akbar!" screamed a voice from the left flank. A burst of AK-47 fire chewed up the rock inches from her face. Stone chips cut her cheek. She swiveled the rifle. It was a snap shot. No time for math. Just instinct. Crack. The screaming stopped. 1 round left. She could hear them talking now. They were close enough to smell. The scent of unwashed bodies, tobacco, and gun oil drifted up on the wind. They were closing the net. Clara didn't pray. She didn't think about home. She thought about the angle of the rock face behind her. She thought about the reload speed of her pistol. She ejected the magazine of the sniper rifle, leaving the empty casing in the chamber to keep the dirt out. It was a club now. She set the rifle down gently. She pulled the pin on her single grenade, holding the spoon tight. "Come on," she hissed. "Don't be shy." The extraction point. Commander Jack Hayes was a man possessed. "Get me the damn casevac," he roared into the handset. "I have a Tier 1 asset pinned down in Sector 4. Commander, we have Winchester, on fuel." The pilot of the extraction, Chinook, argued over the headset. The rotors were churning up a dust storm, masking the noise of the battle below. "We have the wounded. We have the package. We need to lift now." Master Chief Miller was loading the wounded Jackson onto the bird. He looked at Hayes. Miller's face was covered in soot and blood, none of it his own. He grabbed Hayes by the shoulder plate of his vest. "Sir, we lift off, we refuel at the FOB, and we come back with the gunships. If we stay, we die, and she dies for nothing." Hayes looked at the dark valley. He knew the doctrine. The mission comes first. The team comes first. But Clara, she wasn't just an asset anymore. She was the reason they were alive. She's buying us minutes with her life. Miller, Hayes said, his voice cracking. I know, sir, Miller said, and for the first time Hayes saw tears in the giant man's eyes. So let's not waste them. Get on the bird. The Chinook lifted banking hard away from the valley. As they rose, Hayes looked out the rear ramp. He saw the muzzle flashes sparkling on the ridgeline like angry fireflies. One lonely position was firing back. Then a small explosion, a grenade. Then silence, the last stand. Clara had thrown the grenade when they were 10 feet away. The blast bought her 4 seconds. She rolled onto her back, the Sig Sauer extended. Pop, 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 double taps, center mass. 2 fighters coming over the rock tumbled backward. Her world narrowed to the front sight post of her pistol. The pain in her leg was gone, replaced by a cold numbness that was creeping up her waist. Shock. She was bleeding out internally. She fired until the slide locked back. She dropped the mag, slammed a fresh one in, racked the slide. A fighter lunged at her from the side, swinging the buttstock of his rifle. Clara didn't have time to turn. The wood stock slammed into her ribs, knocking the wind out of her. She gasped, coughing blood. The fighter stood over her, raising his rifle to finish it. He was young, his eyes wide with the adrenaline of the kill. Clara raised her pistol. Click! Jam! She dropped the gun. Her hand went to her belt. The knife. The fighter hesitated. He saw her face. He saw the long hair that had come loose from under her helmet. He realized in that split second that the demon who had decimated his squad was a woman. That hesitation cost him his life. Clara lunged upward, screaming a primal sound that tore her throat. She drove the knife into the gap of his vest, finding the subclavian artery. Hot blood sprayed over her night vision goggles, blinding her. She pushed the body off her, gasping for air. She tried to wipe her goggles, but her hands were too slick. She ripped the goggles off. The darkness was absolute now. She could hear more footsteps. Slow, deliberate. They knew she was hurt. They knew she was out of ammo. Clara Vance dragged herself back until her spine hit the cold rock wall. She held the knife in a reverse grip. Her vision was tunneling. The edges of the world were turning grey. She looked up at the stars. They were the same stars she had watched in Wyoming. Cold, indifferent, beautiful. Not bad for a girl, she whispered. She closed her eyes, listening to the boots crunching on the snow, getting closer and closer. And then the sky ripped open. Brrrt! The sound wasn't a noise. It was a physical force. It vibrated through the rock and into her bones. The ground in front of her erupted as 30mm cannon rounds from an AC-130 Spectre gunship churned the earth into a molten soup. Asset 1, this is Angel 1. A voice crackled in her earpiece. She hadn't even realized she was still wearing it. Danger close delivered. Stay down, darling. The cavalry is coming. The sound of rotors, not the heavy thump of a Chinook, but the aggressive chopping whine of little birds. Fast ropes dropped. Figures in black descended like spiders. Clear left, clear right. Movement, drop him. The chatter of suppressed M4s, controlled precise violence. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness, blinding her. I see her. I see the asset. A hand grabbed her vest. A face appeared in the light. It was Miller. He had come back on the little bird. I told you to leave. Clara mumbled her head, lolling. And I ignored you. Miller grunted, hoisting her onto his shoulder, as if she weighed nothing. Commanders give orders. Chiefs make decisions. We're going home, Vance. As he carried her toward the waiting helicopter, Clara looked back at the spot where she had lain. She saw the bodies. She saw the empty brass casings. And then the darkness finally took her. Bethesda Naval Hospital, 3 weeks later. Clara woke up to the steady beep of a monitor. Her leg was shattered, rebuilt with titanium and grit, but she was alive. Admiral McAllister stood by her bedside, his face grim. "You survived, Clara," he said quietly. "But officially, Operation Valkyrie never happened. You were never in the Hindu Kush. There will be no Silver Star, no Navy Cross, just a training accident on your permanent record." Clara looked at the ceiling, the pain radiating through her hip. "I didn't do it for the medal, sir." "I know." McAllister nodded, handing her discharge papers. "But some people don't care about the official record." Naval Air Station Oceana. 2 months later. Clara walked into Hangar 4, the rhythmic click-clack of her cane echoing against the concrete. The space seemed empty until she reached the center. There, standing in perfect formation, was Alpha Platoon. Commander Jack Hayes stepped forward. He looked tired, but his eyes were fierce. "Lieutenant Vance," Hayes said, his voice carrying through the hangar. "According to the Navy, you never held a rifle. You never saved our lives. You are a ghost." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a trident. It wasn't the shiny gold pin of a ceremony. It was blackened, oxidized metal, a combat badge taken from a fallen operator years ago. Hayes pressed it into Clara's palm, closing her fingers over the sharp edges. "The Navy doesn't get to decide who belongs to this brotherhood," Hayes whispered. "We do. You are one of us, Clara. Always." Then the commander took a step back. He looked at the woman who had no official rank in special warfare, the woman with a cane and a scarred leg. He snapped a crisp, razor-sharp salute. "Ready to!" Master Chief Miller barked. Behind Hayes, 20 hardened killers snapped to attention. The entire platoon saluted the asset who had watched over them in the dark. Clara felt a tear slide down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She tightened her grip on the black trident and returned the salute. Clara Vance retired quietly to Wyoming. She never wrote a book. She never went on a podcast. She runs a shooting school, now living a quiet life. But on the wall of her office, inside a simple shadow box, there is no medal. There is only a blackened Navy SEAL trident. No rank, no name. Just the truth. In the official records of the Department of Defense, Operation Valkyrie never happened. The Battle of the Valley never took place. But for 20 men in Alpha Platoon, the memory of the Wraith is more real than any citation on paper. Courage isn't about the accolades you receive in the light. It's about what you are willing to do in the dark. Clara Vance proved that a warrior isn't defined by their gender, their rank, or their patch. They are defined by their willingness to stand between the wolves and the flock. If this story inspired you, do me a favor. Hit that like button to honor the unsung heroes who fight in the shadows. Share this video so their stories, real or represented, aren't forgotten. And subscribe for more untold tales of valor. Until next time, stay safe.